do you?
I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very happy to see you all. It seems to me that the entire population of Slovenia has come out tonight. Clearly there's nothing else to do in Ljubljana on Saturday.
So I started with stage because it all began with stage, with theatre. Writing for theatre was your initiation in writing.
When I was 18, I went to work at a theatre in West London called the Royal Court, which was a very famous and notorious theatre, mostly for new writing. And somebody told me that it was where the most interesting and exciting people in London were. So I went there to work, and I worked selling programs, reading scripts, working in the box office, and eventually I became writer in residence. But because I come from the suburbs, going to the theatre was very exciting for me. I'd never met anybody before who had worked in culture for a living. So it really opened my mind. It was really my education.
Why did you choose this story? It's so anti-Hanif Kureishi story.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's rather sweet. I like that. It's rather gentle. The idea of making a story out of almost nothing, just something that happens between two people, is very...
But you're
like
mocking them, this couple.
No, I'm not.
No?
No. Why would you say that?
Never mind. My impression, but I'm more interested in the woman who wanted to kill you. In another short story that was then, your character Natasha says to her former lover, a writer, "The magic carpet of your imagination didn't fly very far, baby. Why did you take parts of me and put them in a book?" So, how do you cope with that writer's urge to tell what is necessary to tell, and whilst being a son, a brother, a father, a partner, a relative?
It's difficult to speak. Speaking is difficult for anyone, but it's worse not to speak. Silence is much worse. It's more painful. It's either one or the other, silence or speaking. And speaking is better for you. Sometimes people complain about what you say. But that's good. It's good for them. And it's good for you to hear their complaints. And you may have to justify yourself. My students, they start to write. The first thing they say when they start to write, the first thing they say is, "What would my mother say if she knew I was writing this?" They always see their mother saying, "What a terrible person, what a terrible daughter you are to say this." And you have to encourage the students to speak back to their mothers, to say to their mothers what they need to say. And the mother then has to deal with it.
So does writing give you the license to kill? Your father, mother, sister?
I always say to my students, if your writing is not making your family unhappy, it can't be very good.
But how did you explain to your father that Karin's father in the Buddha of suburbia is not actually his portrait, or it is a slightly disguised portrait?
People always write about their parents. I guess I wrote about my dad in the Buddha of suburbia. But the character in the Buddha of suburbia has much more sex than my father did. And I said to him, "Dad, at least I gave you a really good time in this book. You get laid loads." Because in fact he was sitting at home watching the TV like everybody else. So I said, "This book is making you look good, making you seem sexy." So yeah, he seemed rather pleased about that, actually. Originally he was very nervous that the neighbours would think he'd actually been doing the things in the book and character does, and then after a while he started looking rather proud, thinking, they think that I've had a good time.
But it's true that he didn't speak to you for a year because of the Buddha of suburbia?
My father never stopped speaking to me. He rang me up every 5 minutes. I do that with my kids. I torment them all day. So that's absolutely not the case, no.
Okay. Let's go to the rules.
Okay.
Okay. At what point do you know that the story which obsesses you will turn out to be a script, a short story, a novel, an essay maybe?
Well, if it's a piece of fiction, it's not going to be an essay. If it's a piece of fiction, I will really think about it. I think, what can I do with this? Can I make it, should it be a short story, or is there more in it? Can I make it bigger, longer? Can I have more characters? Maybe we can do it as a movie. You know, how can I make money out of this? I'm trying to make a living. I'm a professional writer as well as sometimes something of an artist. So you have to think about all that. You just think it through and then decide whether there's anything else in this that you can make it into a movie with, as it were. I began writing a short story about 3 years ago. Then it became a novella. Then it became a novel. And then it became a movie. And the movie we're preparing and thinking about making. So you just have to think very hard about this stuff and see if there's more in it that you need to say.
How did you meet Stephen Frears?
Stephen Frears is a dear friend of mine. He just texted me earlier with the football results.
But at that time?
I met him in the early 80s and he made my first film, My Beautiful Laundrette. I met him because I found out where he lived. I just, you know, if you want to meet someone, you just ring them up, don't you? If you want to really meet someone, you just ring them up and say, will you meet me tomorrow? So I found out where he lived and I went round to his house.
But in your diaries, in your collected essays, you really write a lot about the respect you've had.
I have great respect for Stephen, and I still have great respect.
That you were scared what he's going to say if he would want to direct your script.
I wanted him to do my film because I'd seen his stuff on television and my friends had talked about him. I knew who he was, but I hadn't met him. So I just went round to his house with the script. For a long time, he thought I was somebody else. Because in those days, there were 2 Pakistanis who were writing. And he thought I was the other Pakistani. And then finally it occurred to him, once he read my script, that I was the Pakistani, the other Pakistani. But he liked my film. And he was terrific. He gave terrific notes. And nobody had ever spoken to me like that before. He just kept saying, oh, make it worse, make it more horrible. Make it more sexy, make it more violent, make it more this, make it more that. And nobody had ever said that to me before. People always wanted you to be more inhibited. And he was saying, oh, then they should fuck each other in the back of the laundrette, they should take their trousers down. And I thought, oh, great, yeah. They should take their trousers down. I haven't seen that in a movie before. A skinhead fucking a Pakistani in the back room of a laundrette. You can't say fairer than that for entertainment, can you? So he was a very good person to work with. He really made me become more of the writer that I wanted to become, really, by just saying, do it more. And in those days, you didn't see many homosexuals in films. In fact, you know, now you see homosexuals in films all the time. You can't get away from it. But in those days, you didn't see it. And in those days, and there have been years, indeed decades, hundreds of years of inhibition with regards to homosexuals. Somerset Maugham, Terence Rattigan, and all the Forster particularly, had found huge difficulty in representing their community. Then at last, by the mid-80s, you could sort of do it.
But did you know what you were doing at that time? I mean, the main protagonist is gay, a drug dealer, and a Paki. It's quite shocking also for...
It seems perfect. Well, yeah, I mean, you couldn't pitch it. You couldn't pitch it in that way. You couldn't go to an executive in an American studio and say, I want to make a film about a gay drug-dealing Pakistani who had sex with a skinhead. And this film is going to be really big. You couldn't do that. You've got to find a producer, though, who had a lot of nerve, who didn't mind being outrageous. It was quite punky, all that. And so we made it very cheaply, we made it very quickly. It was probably the best way to make films. And we just made it for television. And then, you know, showed it at festivals and then it became successful. We were innocent. It can only happen to you once.
Why did Stephen leave you for the Christopher Hampton and Dangerous Liaisons? I mean, how come that you two didn't make another film together?
Well, I became a novelist after that. I wanted to write novels. After Samuel
But right now you are writing a script, you said, in the backstage.
Yeah, I am writing a script. I've written the script, but I don't know who's going to direct it. I don't know if Stephen will want to do it. Stephen went to America after that. He went to America for a long time to make a lot of money and to become a big American director. He made The Grifters, and he made Dangerous Liaison with American actors Glenn Close and John Malkovich and so on. And then he worked with Dustin Hoffman, etc., Bruce Willis. So he disappeared.
And you worked only with Peter or two?
I was working in England, yeah. I mean, I'm the writer, so I need to be near the material. England was and London particularly is my subject.
At what point in the film project does the director get involved with your work as a writer?
Oh, fucking directors. I hate directors. I hate them. I'm working with a director at the moment, a guy called Roger Michel, who's done 4 of my films. He said to me the other day, he said, I read your script, he said, but I think we should start again. I didn't think it was a very good script. I think we should start right from the beginning and throw the script out. I thought, I'll throw you out, mate. I'll throw you through the window in a minute. So you can see the animosity and creative fury that one gets into writing films. It's and particularly as you get older, when you become more irritable, it's just difficult to work with other people. It's like being...
With Patricia, it was completely different. He just took a part of your novel Intimacy and make it into the movie, or what?
Patricia just went off and he made his film. And he was an absolutely charming man, a very, very intelligent man, and he cast the film very well and he made a very good film. He didn't bother me.
But how was it for you?
Well, it didn't bother me at all. I didn't have to do anything. I just stayed at home and he went off and made it. And he used to come round in the evenings looking broken. It wasn't a bother.
No, I didn't quite well catch you, sorry.
Well, I didn't write that film. It was written by somebody else.
I mean, how was it for the first time when you were watching the movie? Full of explicit sex scenes. And it's quite a different movie than your novel.
Well, it's big, isn't it? You write a story in your room, you write it down, and then when you see 2 actors naked, fucking, it's a completely different thing and really shocking. And then you see that in a room with lots of other people and you think, bloody hell. It's just love, when I wrote it. It's an amazing transformation to see a page of dialogue, a page that you've written into a big movie. But it's very, very exciting. And if you've got good actors, you should be proud.
You wrote that being a screenwriter is always uncomfortable because the real artist is a film director. But with you, it just doesn't seem the case. Hanif Kureishi.
As I get older, I find it more of a pain in the ass doing films. The money, the whole hustle is huge, dealing with the actors, But it's mostly the director does that. But I'm just as happy to write a story. But there's no money in writing a story, so then you have to do it as a film, and then Peter O'Toole irritates you.
Lawrence of Arabia.
Or Florence of Arabia, as we used to call it.
Another quote of you, I'm sorry. You write so good, obviously. Desire is the original anarchist and undercover agent. No wonder people wanted to arrest it and kept in a safe place. That's what you're...
Where did you get that from?
Jay, your protagonist in Intimacy.
Well, you begin a story when people meet, when 2 people meet, when something happens between them. It's desire is the motor. If you're a baby, if you don't desire, you don't kick and scream and want things, you've had it, you're dead. So desire is the motor of existence. And when people are most alive is usually when they're most frightened or when they most desire something. And that's when they're most vulnerable, when you want somebody and you think, my God, this person's going to change my life, I really want them badly. And not only if you want them for sex, which is easy, but when you really want them because you really like them and you want them a lot, then you feel very uncomfortable, you're very dependent on them, your life becomes very difficult, you have to give up certain other things. But at least for a writer, you have a really good story there. So that is the beginning of a story.
Yeah, but what does desire in a certain period of time tell us about the political temperature? It can be an acid test for political movements in society.
Well, yeah, 2 people desiring each other involves the whole family, involves the whole society. If you look at Romeo and Juliet, for instance, you can see that it's not just 2 people fucking; it's a whole world. and two people desiring each other, let's say, homosexually, let's say, in a Muslim country, would be completely different to somebody, you know, two heterosexuals desiring each other in Paris. So you involve a whole world in terms of the desire, in terms of the prohibitions in the society, what's at stake, what you're risking, and so on. And if the risk is very high, then you've got to, you know, if they may be killed for their desire, then you've got a big story going.
What did sexual revolution did to you, or did to us, or did for us?
Well, it released people from the stupidity of endless frustration that Freud talks about. You know, that, for instance, that the young people, certainly in Freud's time, couldn't have sex, and men only with prostitutes, and the women very rarely until they married, so they had to wait ages. And during that time, they went mad. And then in the 60s, people just copulated all the time, more or less at random. And many of my gay friends, mostly my gay friends, still in fact do that. A friend of mine who was a school teacher, a very respectable, very nice man, usually on Saturday night, he has sex with 20 people. As I said to him the other day, so few.
So they're going to be in your next novel?
I think I'm too old for that.
I mean, friends.
What?
Your protagonist act almost the same.
Protagonist?
In the novel.
Which novel?
Something to tell you. You were for sure one of the first authors who brought us in the underground or dark underbelly of London with these fetish clubs and sadomasochism.
Yes, I don't find that. Yeah, I did.
Why?
I did because I guess I was interested in what would happen if you fulfilled all your desires. But I don't think it's dangerous enough. I don't think sex is dangerous enough. I think the real danger is really in falling in love with somebody. And I think that having sex perpetually is a defense against really getting involved with somebody, which is much worse and much more painful and difficult. And I think, yes, it's that really. I mean, in a sense, sex becomes, certainly in the West, it becomes too easy, it can be meaningless and it can become devalued. Whereas love, I think, or really falling for someone can really change your life. I mean, somebody who has a very compartmentalized life, you know, and then they have sex on Saturday night with 20 people. In a sense, they're not risking safe sex. They're not really risking anything at all. It's too easy. It's meaningless. So, because sex is so powerful, I think the desire to devalue it over and over again is important to some people, and I think that sort of sexuality does devalue sexuality, which is, I think, presumably the idea of it.
Dostoevsky once said that on earth we can only love with pain and through pain, that we cannot love without pain. It seems that nothing has changed from Dostoevsky's time to now. According to your novels.
I knew you were going to quote Dostoevsky to me. You look like a woman who would quote Dostoevsky. When I saw you, I thought that woman is going to quote Dostoevsky to me.
You said that you were going to be nice to me. Otherwise, I'm going to ask you the question.
No, don't.
Okay.
I've heard that this woman is very naughty in Slovenia.
We can talk about drugs instead of Dostoevsky.
Love is very painful. It's very, very painful. But it wouldn't be any fun if it wasn't, would it? If it wasn't painful, it wouldn't be worth doing. There would be no sense, there would be nothing to lose. There would be no fear, there would be no dependency, there would be no horror of failure, there would be no divorce, there would be nothing. So the fact that it is painful makes it interesting. I mean, writing is like that. The fact that writing is difficult, that you suffer sometimes when you're doing it, that it's pain to do, it makes it worth doing. If it was nothing, if it was only pleasure, it would be empty. There you go.
Well, I have no more questions
thank
after
God.
that. But can drugs assist at the creative process? I mean, what did you mean by saying that ecstasy, for example, was a Thatcherite drug because you could get bliss out on the weekend and still go to work Monday morning?
I've never known anybody who's been assisted in their creativity by being stoned.
Aldous Huxley, for example.
I rest my case, yes. I mean, I don't think Aldous Huxley, who nobody reads, I don't think actually was stoned on acid when he was writing The Doors of Perception. I don't think that there was no, the idea that you could take a pill and become a good writer is just a really stupid idea and not sensible at all. I think drugs are very useful for certain things. I use drugs in order to enable me to watch television.
What kind of drugs for television would you recommend?
I find watching television so intolerable and so ghastly that the only way I can take it is to be stoned out of my mind when I'm watching it. At which point I find it really interesting, either that or I'm asleep.
Recently you said that you are more interested in Ritalin, for example, a drug which is widely used to control hyperactive kids.
I've just written an essay for the New York Times called The Art of Distraction, a really good essay, in my view, about Ritalin and about the use of drugs. I take now and again. I take some Ritalin. I took some the other day. Me and my first son, Sasha, we had to go and see Hamlet, and this was a really fucking long production of Hamlet. And I said to him, "You should go and see this play," and he'd never seen it. And he didn't know what happened at the end. And he said, well, it's going to go on for hours, isn't it? It's going to be terrible. I said, yeah, it's going to be a nightmare. What are we going to do? So we took some Ritalin to get through it. And we were sitting through Hamlet, we were both sitting there. At the end, he said to me, oh, that's a good play, isn't it? I said, I told you it was a good play. He said, wow. And then we talked about it for hours afterwards, so we had a fantastic experience. So I would recommend it in certain circumstances.
I think it's time for the questions from public, but just another one. How did it feel to interview David Bowie, your teen idol? I mean, it must have been very inspiring for both of you because he wrote a soundtrack for BBC version.
He did the soundtrack for The Buddha of Suburbia. Yeah, it was very, very exciting for me to meet him and to spend time with him and to work with him, but also very, very embarrassing as well.
Why?
Because he's a god. He's a hero.
And Prince is just a prince.
And when I work with Bowie, I mean, you have to really work with people, which means that you have to say to them, I think it should be more of that and a bit slower and a bit quicker there, and maybe, do a bit of this and a bit of that. And I thought, I can't say that to David Bowie. This man is a genius. I can't say to him, I think you should be a bit quicker there and a bit slower there. So it was a bit tricky to do, but obviously you have to do that if you're working with somebody on a piece of music that has to fit on a certain bit of the film, So we found all that, and me and the director, we were much younger then, and it was a bit tricky to do, and I kept saying to him, the director, I kept saying, I think you should say to David Bowie, this bit should be a bit quicker. You used to say to him, this bit is a bit slower, etc., etc. And Bowie, though, got very annoyed about this, and then he stayed up all night and redid all the music. It was incredible. He stayed up the whole night, and in the morning we saw him. It was an incredible feat of sort of professionalism. It was amazing to see, and we thought this bloke really works hard.